We're setting the criteria in the application process for our victim services. If we make it so complicated and inaccessible, then we're really just making sure that a whole lot of people never actually access any of the resources that they're supposed to be able to have. I am Dr. Dawn Harvard, and I'm from the Wacomiconk First Nation on Manitoulin Island, and I am the interim president for the Native Women's Association of Canada.
My name is Yvonne Harvey. I'm the co-founder of Canadian Parents of Murdered Children and Survivors of Homicide Victim.
This is Canada, but each province has responsibility for victim services, and so there is a great level of variation across the country. And this is something that a lot of the families of the missing and murdered women were suggesting recently, that there needs to be a minimum standard of care, a minimum standard of response, and a minimum response for dealing with, for responding to, for being sensitive to those families who are coming forward. Because if an Aboriginal woman or girl goes missing or is murdered, even though the girl herself is obviously the victim, most often the ones who are going to be looking for victim services or who are going to be the victims in this situation is that family that's left behind. And it's tragic when a family that is already coping with a missing or murdered loved one is then re-victimized by the services, by the police forces, by the professionals who are supposed to be supporting and helping them. And if you're in a time of crisis, this time of tragedy, that's not the time for you to be going looking to find out what your rights are or to find out who it is you can go to help you enforce those rights. So we do need that sensitivity training, that minimum standard of response for victims across the whole country, because you should be able to expect the same level of treatment whether you're in downtown Toronto or downtown Vancouver.
In my case, my daughter was murdered in Newfoundland and I was a resident of Ontario. I was not entitled to any services in Ontario or Newfoundland.
Even one of the things we've been hearing is some of the victim services, some of the programs, some of the funds that are out there. If you're in a community where you don't have easy access to internet, or if your homeless shelter is where you sleep at night, to call an office and have them say, well, it's all online, you have to go download the form and do this and that. You know, we're presupposing that everybody in this country has that minimum standard of you all have online and access, and there's some communities that don't have broadband, especially the remote First Nations communities.
So what we need to do is we need to have equality, which means that regardless of where the crime occurs, the family or the next of kin should have the same services that they would be afforded if they were living in the province in which the crime occurred. Victims do not experience crime or the subsequent consequences of crime and the impact of crime based on jurisdiction or geographical limitations.
And let's start turning that around in terms of our conceptions and not look at the victim as having a deficiency because they don't have the right language, especially with First Nations people. Let's start looking at it as, you know, those who are being employed to do this job don't have all of the skills they need. And if they don't have the ability to speak the native languages, if they don't have those, then we need to find somebody who does in order to bridge that gap between the victim and between the authorities and the judges and the justice system to make sure that those voices are heard.
We all experience the same thing regardless of where we live in this country, and we should all be entitled to the same help and support to rebuild and to reframe our lives after we've been victimized so that we can go back into our communities with a sense of hope and purpose